masked man on a lakeshore, a taxi idling at Cherry in Washington, letters that turn murder into headlines. For more than 50 years, the Zodiac case has endured not just as an unsolved crime, but as a public obsession. Hello, and welcome to the Chronicle. Each month, we bring together experts and researchers for something increasingly rare, civil and thoughtful debate. We don't aim for consensus. Instead, we examine the evidence at different angles, test competing theories, and give credit where it's due across the entire research community. I'm your host, Cheryl. With a background in cognitive behavioral therapy, I'll be guiding our panel through tonight's discussion. Our topic is the killer's mindset. But we begin, as we will in every show, with the latest developments. Let's open the Zodiac Ledger. Sobering news about the official investigation. This summer, veteran researcher Tom Voigt of ZodiacKiller.com delivered a blunt assessment. There is no meaningful investigation, DNA or otherwise, happening in any jurisdiction tied to these murders. Despite the success of forensic genealogy in the Golden State Killer case, agencies working Zodiac have yet to announce a DNA profile suitable for that technology. And recent FBI FOIA requests are being denied, limiting developments of new leads. In that silence, speculation fills the gap, including claims by the case breakers naming Gary Francis Post. Those claims have been criticized by multiple researchers and continue to circulate in the media. Voigt further alleges items once seized from Arthur Lee Allen, including Zodiac brand wristwatch and a large knife, are missing and officially listed as stolen. These allegations, if true, raise profound questions not just about Allen's potential guilt or innocence, but about the integrity of the entire investigation. How can a case be solved when key evidence has vanished? And what else might have been compromised over the past 5 decades? An informal Reddit Zodiac Killer poll illustrates how divided opinion remains on the Allen involvement. 41% of around 450 respondents still point to Allen. 44% believe that the killer is still unknown to law enforcement, and all other suspects combined receive 6%. The lack of official progress stands in stark relief against the energy of the true crime community, which gathered 3 weeks ago at the CrimeCon in Denver. While the event drew thousands of enthusiasts, it yields no significant Zodiac-related news. Even as official progress is stalled, the cultural conversation is still moving. Zodiac Killer Project, directed by Charlie Shackleton, won awards at Sundance and opens in limited theatrical release this November. It doesn't offer a solution. Instead, it critiques the true crime genre itself, asking why this story still commands attention and what it says about us as a community. In publishing, 3 books take different angles. Michael Butterfield's The Zodiac Killer, the story of America's most elusive murderer, separates folklore from evidence. John Bowman's The Door Files mines military records on a lesser-known suspect. And James Big Twins, The Only Time Richard Got Angry with Me, revisits Richard Gaikowski with alleged links to unsolved Stanford murders. In podcasts, The Consult Real FBI Profilers released a 5-part series with former FBI profiler Julia Cowley and Michael Butterfield walking through the case crime by crime, from Lake Berryessa knife attack to the shooting of Paul Stein in San Francisco. Cowley then joined Zodiac Speaking for questions about profiling techniques and what they suggest about Michael Morford's POI Mac. And John Douglas, the profiler behind Mindhunter, joined True Crime Garage for a 2-part episode, covering multiple cases, including his thoughts on the Zodiac psychology. Here on YouTube, researchers are presenting these solutions to the Zodiac ciphers and making their case. David Ranchek, part of the team that cracked the Z340, posted a detailed analysis of Ryan Garlick's proposed solution to the Z32 bus bomb cipher. Down in the Zodiac basement, Dionne Walker continues his methodical walkthrough of the original FBI documents, recently focusing on the Hamlet letter. Elsewhere, assumptions are being challenged. Ned DeHaan and Vince McConnell, a.k.a. New Cokes, revisited the Sherry Jo Bates case. Author Michael Cole discussed ideas from his book series on Planet X Filmworks. Justice Talks True Crime continues its look at Chester Klingle, and Mysteries with Mr. Belgique and Black Box Online Radio keep real-time discussion going across the case. As we close today's ledger, we pause to remember why this all matters. Yesterday, Saturday, September 27th, marks 56 years since Lake Berryessa, where the killer brutally attacked Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard. It's a stark reminder that behind the theories and debates are real victims whose families still seek answers. Links to everything mentioned are available in the show description. Now let's recognize a specific contribution from the community. This month, we would like to recognize the Zodiac Theory member who makes Jane Goodall wish that she could be in Zodiac Theory Discord. This month's shout out is to our one and only Gorilla Train for his wonderful 64-page deep dive into Lake Herman Road murders of David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen. In it, he not only has been able to nail down the relations of all the residents in the area and the activity that night, but also has been able to nail down the identity of the elusive Mr. Prentice. To check out Gorilla Train's Bananagram, check out the link in it to his piece in the description. Great job, GT. We've all asked, who is a Zodiac Killer? But today we're asking a more unsettling question. What kind of a mind would create such an elaborate terror? The case itself was built on a central contradiction. On one hand, the evidence points to a meticulous planner, a killer who tapes a flashlight to his gun for better targeting and creates a cipher so complex that it takes 51 years to be solved. But on the other, it reveals a chaotic amateur, a man in a bizarre theatrical costume who leaves his own fingerprints and blood at a crime scene. The crimes were a physical assault, but the letters began the psychological one. Through more than 21 communications, he taunted police and terrorized the public, demanding front-page coverage while crafting a specific persona for himself. That persona, however, only deepens the mystery. The same writer who demonstrated knowledge of Old Norse, British operata, and MFO bombs produced communications that seemed semi-literate, filled with misspellings and grammatical errors. And then, after the murder of cab driver Paul Stein on October 11, 1969, the killing simply stopped. The letters continued sporadically, but the murders that had terrorized Northern California ceased as abruptly as they began. But why? Our panel of researchers have spent years studying not just the crimes, but the mind behind them. They bring radically different perspectives about who this person was and what drove him. Was the Zodiac a criminal mastermind or a lucky amateur? A powerful member of society hiding in plain sight? Or a nobody desperate for recognition? Did he stop because he achieved some ultimate victory, or because he became too close to being caught? The documents, the evidence, letters themselves, they tell us everything and nothing. They reveal a mind that was calculating yet impulsive, sophisticated yet crude, controlled yet chaotic. Perhaps most disturbing of all, they suggest someone who understood that the greatest terror isn't the act of violence itself, but in the story that the violence creates, a story that we're still trying to understand. To help unpack that complex psychological portrait, we want to bring your voice into the discussion. Please submit your questions for the panel in the YouTube chat, and we'll address as many as we can at the end of the show. We are also hosting a poll in the chat right now. We want your initial assessment of the Zodiac's primary psychological profile. We'll post it again at the end of our conversation to see if your opinions have changed. Now let's open it up to our panel. With us are Shake Dog Shake, a researcher bringing sociological perspective to the case, Justice Nicol, who joins us with a background in criminal justice and forensic science, Blake H., who will be sharing his investigation into a compelling new suspect later in the show, Dreezer, a longtime researcher with deep knowledge of the case files, and Mike Rodelli, a researcher of over 25 years who believes he has solved the case. Welcome. Looks like we're just waiting on Shake. Justice is here.
Hello.
Okay, thank you all for joining us.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us on the panel.
We're going to start off the panel discussion initially with who exactly is the Zodiac. We have some different opinions out there, obviously. We have Mike Rodelli here, who has written a book, In the Shadow of Mount Diablo, which our book club has recently read at our Zodiac Theory Discord book club, and we've really enjoyed that. And in Mike's book, he suggests that his suspect is actually hiding in the power elite. We've recently heard the Consult podcast come out with an assessment where they have a very differing opinion of that. So we're gonna start out with Mike initially, because we really want to initially look at these very different perspectives of the killer's mindset. Mike, if you can go ahead and tell us a little bit about your view of the killer's mindset. Your suspect was Shel Cavalli. And if you could tell us a little bit about your perspective on him coming from the power elite.
Well, my perspective really, there's sort of a history behind my perspective. After the 2002 ABC show where Cavalli was essentially eliminated by DNA, I was left with a quandary because I had all this evidence that pointed at him, but the DNA said it wasn't him. So eventually in 2004, I went to the VDOC Society in Philadelphia, which is a group that studies cold cases, to try to get sort of an objective opinion as to whether they thought that Cavalli was a reasonable suspect. And I spoke to Frank Bender, who was, he's now deceased, but he was a forensic sculptor of some renown. And he was one of the co-founders of the society. He said I had to talk to Richard Walter. I had no idea who Richard Walter was. So I said, okay. So I started talking to Richard Walter. And it turns out that Walter was the profiler or the behavioral profiler for the group. And he asked me for, he does his profiling only through crime scene analysis. In other words, analysis of the crime scenes. He doesn't use any of the letters, any of this other stuff, because he feels that that's all post-crime behavior and could contain misinformation and intentionally. So he asked me to write down summaries of the 4 crime scenes: Lake Herman Road, Blue Rock Springs, Lake Berryessa, and Presidio Heights, and I sent them to him. And his conclusion, this isn't my conclusion, his conclusion was that Zodiac was a non-sexual, power-assertive killer. In other words, someone who lived for power and who strove for power and who couldn't get enough power. So that's the profile. And prior to that, I had developed Cavalli as a suspect, and he didn't fit any of the profiles because everyone said that Zodiac was a loser who was compensating for his feelings of inadequacy and all this other stuff. All of a sudden, Richard Walter came along with a profile that fit Cavalli. And so I thought I was on the right track again. And it turns out that the DNA that they used to eliminate him, based on the 2018 discussion with the whistleblower who came forward to Tom Boyd on ZodiacKiller.com, that DNA is not even considered to be from Zodiac. So I don't know. I think that the DNA. You're getting me off into a tangent of DNA, but I think the DNA is a scam. I think that they know that there's no DNA on the letters, but they've been perpetuating this myth in order to run out the time, run out the clock on the case. And now you find out there's no research going on in the letters because there's nothing to find. The Zodiac didn't lick his stamps and envelopes. And if you're looking for an analogy, the Monster of Florence, on which I'm also writing a book right now, he sent a letter in 1985, and it turns out that he didn't lick his stamps and envelopes. So they couldn't get his DNA from the letters either. So it's not like the Zodiac's the only person who ever thought of not licking his stamps and envelopes prior to the advent of DNA.
Very interesting. For the rest of our panel, Druser, what are your thoughts between the killer's mindset, the difference between him possibly being part of the power elite versus the idea of him being an underachiever?
Hi, everyone. I don't think there's a lot of information to have confidence in any kind of theory either way. I would say that he didn't use his spotlight to try to get money from anyone, and whether that was just because he wasn't foolish or he didn't need money, I'm not sure. He spent a lot of time preparing, several letters. So I don't know. I guess I would perhaps go somewhere in the middle. I don't think he was worried about making rent, but I'm not sure. Maybe Mike can tell us more about why he may have been perceived as wealthy.
Sure. Richard Walter feels that the fact that Zodiac had the time to create these ciphers and create these bomb diagrams meant that he had leisure time. And to him, I asked him about whether that was someone like Arthur Lee Allen, who was just bumming around, had a lot of time on his hands. He said, no, this suggests a wealthy person. So again, this is Richard Walter speaking. He said the Zodiac was a wealthy, power assertive killer. And, that matches my suspect, and that's the profile that I'm going with.
Blake, you're a new person who has been added to our server, and you brought forward a new suspect. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because you hear a lot of different criminal profiles being built on the Zodiac, and just what Mike said. I mean, you get a wide array of what people think. Like, you get the consult that says one thing, his profiler says something else. We probably tend to fall in with our suspect or whatever we personally believe in the case. I see it kind of a different way. I think, without knowing who the Zodiac is, I try to stick to a lot of like generality with what we see in serial killers. Someone that, experienced past physical or sexual abuse as a kid. I see the letters as him kind of, grandstanding, looking for attention, something that, he wasn't seeing in his day-to-day life. He was using it as kind of a cry for attention. Like, look at me. I can, I know about radians. I know how to do ciphers. I know how to do all these things, but I'm not sure he was using those things day to day. And yeah, I kind of take it from that approach. I think that I do tend to think there is a pretty strong sexual element to the case, which, I can see either way why you'd think maybe not, but I use Son of Sam. He didn't really touch any of his victims, but there was learned to be a sexual element within that case when we finally figured out who the Son of Sam was, David Berkowitz. So I think, he's kind of developing a pattern, attacking couples in lovers lane areas. And I think that speaks to somebody that may be sexually frustrated. So that's some of my preliminary thoughts on who the Zodiac may be.
Sheikh, with your POI, what are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, hello. I hope you can hear me. I have this kind of deep voice because I was up all night last night. It's great to be here with everyone. It's great to have you, Cheryl, as our host. It's great to have Mike here. It's good to see you again, Mike. Well, I would like to say a few words about the key position of Mike on the killer's profile, the power assertive sociopathic killer, in a non-sexual way. I would like to leave wealthy out of the picture for now. Let's focus on the power assertive, non-sexual sociopathic killer. I agree with that. My avenue towards reaching that conclusion was through the construction of, as you have seen, I use the acronym CHS, Contextual Holistic Systemic, to describe data sets that have been derived by me from the killer's own actions and words, exclusively from his own work. And that led me to a construction of a profile that has the super arts position, let's say, of the biocartographer homicidal predator. And there are key bullets within that super cluster of identification. One of those is, for example, the killer predator, the non-sexual executioner, the genealogy hunter. And within that framework, there is, of course, the element of the power assertive sociopathic killer. So I agree with that statement. It may be from a different avenue, but as I have also said in the past, I try to inform on the work of people and see where there are commonalities, because if two different researchers, especially from two different avenues, reach the same conclusion, then there's something there worthy of studying further. And this is, as for my Zodiac research. Concerning the POI, it's another discussion. I try to keep the two separate and see for my own private research where these two clusters may intersect.
And Justice, you're coming from a criminology background, and congratulations on your YouTube channel. You're doing a great job with that, by the way.
Thank you.
What are your thoughts?
So I have spoken to some of my professors directly about the Zodiac Killer. In specific, I would give a shout out to Dr. Rainstrom, she was my forensic science teacher, but she also studies psychology. She fell in line with, as Rodelli was saying, a lot of the old line researchers and profilers from back in the day who basically thought that Zodiac was sexually frustrated, living in his mother's basement, and that the murders were coming from a place of sexual frustration. It was all based on, I like to separate killers who were caught by traditional police work from killers who were caught by advancements in technology that they could not foresee. I put Zodiac in the second category simply because he was not able to be caught by traditional police work. I've noticed a pattern that killers who are caught by advancements in technology, and rather than traditional police work, they tend to start killing older. They tend to do a little bit better for themselves, have a job that helps them get away with their crimes, such as a interstate truck driver, police officer, something like that. They tend to have a family, and they tend to kill further away from their home. Then the more traditional serial killer that you're used to seeing, who's like early 20s, they kill in their general vicinity, they get caught relatively quickly within a couple of years. The type of people who the police just hitting the street and talking to people would be able to find. So if you're looking at serial killers like BTK or Joseph D'Angelo or even Gary Ridgway, who they slipped through the cracks of the traditional police work that was attempting to catch these killers, then you sort of find this pattern that they started killing in their late 20s, early 30s, killing further away from their home, driving longer distances to commit their crimes. As for the motivation of the killer, I think that there could be some sexual frustration element to it, but I think that the Zodiac Killer was somebody who felt unseen and unappreciated in his everyday life. I think that he worked a job where he didn't get, I do think that he held a job and that he held a full-time job. And I think that he worked a job where he felt like he wasn't as appreciated as he could have been. I guess if you're going with what the terms you were talking about earlier, I would say not necessarily an underachiever, but he was not as recognized as he would have liked to have been for his achievements. I think that as much as they are, did you call them post-crime activities, I think that it's a mistake to ignore the letters entirely when it comes to profiling the Zodiac, because I think that the letters are a major part of why he was killing. I think he wanted headlines and he wanted to terrorize people. And that comes to a lot of his threats. And I'm not going to say that he's purely a terrorist more than he's a serial killer, but you can definitely see where with his bomb threats, his extortion of the newspapers, threatening to go on a rampage or threatening to kill people if they don't print what he wants to say. I think there's a terroristic element to the crimes. And so you can profile him sort of as a terrorist to an extent. I would say that as far as the murders go, him attacking couples may have been more a matter of convenience. They are in locations that are hard to reach. They're sort of out of the way. They're dimly lit. There's not a lot of traffic. They are lovers' lanes for the same reasons that they make good murder locations, and that you're not going to be seen there generally unless there's a lot of people driving through, in which case you normally have some time to get away, as clearly he did. I think that he was a thrill killer. I think that he started killing, I would lean towards he started killing at Lake Herman Road. And then I think that he was satisfied with that at the time, got the thrill that he wanted out of it, attempted to replicate that at Blue Rock Springs, and it wasn't enough of a thrill for him, so he escalated at Lake Berryessa, where he was attacking in the daytime. He's attacking with a knife. It's a more brutal, more personal, close-up crime. And then he sees these type of killers who write to the paper, they pay a lot of attention to the coverage on them. So I think that he noticed that the people of San Francisco weren't as scared of him as he would like them to be. And so he kills a man in San Francisco. And then I think he almost gets caught and he sort of backs off, at least with the letter writing, because he doesn't want to risk getting caught, or at least with the taking credit, with letters.
Very, very interesting take on that.
Can I interject some more information?
Sure.
All right. First of all, Richard Walter is an elite profiler. He's not just a run-of-the-mill profiler. He helped solve the case of John List, which was one of the most extensively researched cases in history. And he was able to help bring John List to justice. In fact, he worked with Frank Bender, whom I mentioned before, who did a sculpture of John List, who was looked almost exactly like John List when he was caught. And Walter was the one that suggested that they put the square glasses on to make him look more erudite, and that's exactly what he was wearing. So Richard Walter is an elite profiler. He looked at all four of the crime scenes. When someone said that there's not enough information to develop a profile, I have to disagree, because Walter develops his profile based on what happened at the crime scenes. And the way he described the crime scenes is the killer took immediate control of the situation with a gun or a knife, and he then killed the people, especially at Lake Berryessa. When he had them tied up, he didn't sexually assault anybody. He just walked away. So these are non-sexual crimes. He was a non-sexual killer. And he was also a power assertive killer. And as someone mentioned before, a sociopath too. One of the things I'm pretty remiss about in doing these types of things is holding up my book. So I want to show everybody my book so they know the title. That's the book right there. And it's available on Amazon. It's getting 4.6 stars. And I think that people have to recognize the fact. Thank you. People have to recognize the fact that Richard Walter is an elite profiler, and when he says that Zodiac was a power assertive killer, I believe him.
Yeah. Very good points. And one of the things that I was going to actually say something before you said that is what really is important is also taking into account that even though we look at some people, like when you look at Cavalli, it's more how they perceive themselves. So even though our thoughts motivate our behaviors. And when you see somebody like Cavalli, who is really, we consider him a piece of the elite society. We think of him as very successful. What's really important when we look at people and what's motivating their behavior is how they view themselves. And quite often you can see people who are perceived as very successful because that is what's driving their behavior.
I agree. I think that he wanted to be more recognized than he was at the time. I mean, there were a lot of articles written about him. Don't let me kid you. There was thousands of articles written about him, but I think that his perception of himself was that because of his name, it was kind of odd. I think that sort of prevented people from getting to know him very well. But I think that he wanted to be like a household name, and he never became one. So that might have motivated him in some way to to take his. The other thing is that the letter that I found that initially interested me in him was a letter about young people. It was about young people causing problems with the People's Park incident in Berkeley. He wrote another letter that I found out about. I didn't even know about it until the second book came out by Gerald Doan last year. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, sorry. It was early. It was earlier this year. It was called "Flirting with the Executioner." That was Gerald Doan's second book, and he came up with a letter that Cavalli wrote about Berkeley, again about students. So he seemed to have some kind of a thing for being against students. And who do you find at lovers' lanes? You don't find 50-year-olds making out. You find students. And so I think that may be why he attacked at lovers' lanes, because he knew he would find young people there who were the people that he had an issue with, apparently, according to the letters that he wrote.
Yes, and also like the targeting of children on school buses. There is a lot of debate. Like there are so many paradoxes with this killer. When you look at it, you can look at it as a lover's lane, or you can look at it as, the question is that people who write letters, the serial killers who write letters usually have some kind of a grudge. But the interesting thing is that in all of his letters, he really never comes outright and tells you what his grudge is. So that really is kind of an interesting thing, because you really don't know is his grudge against younger people, or is his grudge against,
Well, I think from his crime scenes, you can see that he was going after places where younger people congregated. I mean, there aren't a lot of crime scenes to go on. There's only 3 of them, other than the cab driver.
Right.
But he seemed to go to places where young people would be. And by the way, if you read my book, you know that I don't think that the bus bombs are bus bombs at all. So
right.
they're not bombs themselves. They're actually things that are much more interesting, I think. Anyway.
Yeah. One thing that I kind of learned as I was going through, I had just a random thought just to go through newspapers, and I tried to sort out all of the lovers lane crimes from the entire state of California in 1960s. I went through and just tried to document all of them. And there was one that was nearby my suspect's house, and I'm not even saying that he was involved with it, but the notion of the lovers lane crime was, it was listed as the unsolvable crime in the papers. This was in 1966. And I found that interesting that even then people were kind of writing about how the lovers lane crime is unsolvable, because it's just, these remote locations. If you're committing a crime with a gun, you're not handling the victims. There's no sexual assault happening of the victims. It is, at the time, with the evidence they had to work with, the technology they had as well, it really was a very difficult crime to solve. And just seeing that in the papers, maybe Zodiac knew that as well, that those crimes were more likely to be unsolved versus, another type of crime. And he may have, decided that was the reason he wanted to,
well, inherently, at Lake Herman Road, there's no witnesses.
Right.
Except for the people that drove by. But
Yep.
Other than that, you're out in the middle of nowhere. So yep. I can see where that would be a very, very difficult crime to solve, especially if the key witness didn't notice Zodiac's car. That made it even worse.
Yep.
This gorilla train, you said that he had discovered something. He didn't discover the name of Crow's girlfriend, right? He discovered something else?
He did a lot of really intricate background information. He did a 64-page that's linked in the description, but he was actually able to nail down who the actual Mr. Prentice that was.
Mr. Prentice, okay.
Right.
I've always wanted to know who the girlfriend was with Crow, because she could either verify, confirm, or deny his story.
Right.
And because Crow is a very, I've tried to deal with Crow myself personally. And he's a very, very, very shady guy, I hate to say. And, I wish that we could talk to the girlfriend who was there with him, allegedly with him. I guess she was with him, just to find out who she was and find out if she's verifying his story, or, whether there's any differences. Because I know that after the crime, someone saw I guess he said he was in a blue foreign car, a British car, I think. He said either a Triumph or an MG. But if you read through the Lake Herman Road report, sometime after the murders took place, there was a yellow sports car seen. And I don't know if that, if that was them, if he really left the area or if he didn't leave the area. These are things I'd love to find out. But if we can't talk to the girlfriend, she's never mentioned any of the reports in terms of her name or anything like that. So, but she was allegedly the one who bought the car that they were in. And if she bought it in San Francisco and there was an MG or a Triumph, you can imagine who she bought it from.
Right. And that was a very narrow time frame there on Lake Herman Road. Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on to our next topic. Was he a genius or a bungler? So he's either a very sick genius, or he's kind of just a wily coyote, just out there. There's so much that when we look at it, what are your thoughts, Sheikh? I know that you have some thoughts on very strong thoughts on whether he was a genius or whether he was just bungling his way through all of these crimes. Sheikh, are you with us?
Well, my opinion is that, yeah, I don't know if you can hear me now.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, I'm having a kind of not genius connection on my internet currently, so bear with me. My opinion is that he was extremely efficient. So I wouldn't like to use the word genius for two reasons. One, because we don't have the assessment of an IQ test, even though I could go into great lengths about the person I'm looking into. And second is because the word genius is associated with something positive that acknowledges some work. So I would like to say that he's extremely efficient. He was extremely efficient. He was a very swift executioner. Like Mike said, he goes to the scene, he assumes the full control of the situation, he gets the job done. Mike Mazo survives by miracle, and then what I believe he does is he revises the Lake Berryessa attack by risking a survivor who would be the audience that would tell the world of this theatrical playwright director. But regardless of that, the general consensus is that he has full control of the situation. I believe he was like that in his everyday life and activities, and I believe that everything that has been communicated through the letters and the ciphers is extremely deliberate, orchestrated, and rehearsed many years in advance. That includes the misspellings. You see that I have put out a recent piece on the 408 side of the two-coin solution of Z13. This is my position now about Z13. Very soon I will be able to share with you all the sources of the misspellings and how they lead to a very narrow theatrical and literate group of people in the English Renaissance period. So my take, highly efficient, very well orchestrated, systemic inferences from very different clusters of coding and dataset reference indexes, from runic encoding, runic encryption, which, by the way, is a point to Mike's work because he had dedicated time to demonstrate the importance of Mount Diablo geometry, sacred geometry, and the Norse tradition in a time and a place where literally very few people did. And while I was able to find these traces from a totally different perspective, I could link to Mike's research and then be able to gain from his own wealth of information as well. So these different coding systems don't necessarily depict a genius, but they depict someone who can take different pieces of info and blend it together in a mystifying piece, which has one, I think, main objective: to assert power through the communications in the same way that he did with the murder scenes. He's doing the same. He's asserting control. He's taking control of the narrative, and he wants his legacy to be the infamous, notorious, eternal killer who who taunted everyone.
Very good point. Thank you. Justice, what are your thoughts on this? He did have, when you look at all of the things he referenced to, the engineering, the different references in the media that he referenced to, what are your thoughts? I mean, is he just copying some of this, or does he really have or is he someone that really does have that extensive knowledge base?
Well, I think that it's fair to say that he was not stupid. I don't think he was a bungler. I think that he used a different gun in each crime, so he had some level of awareness of forensics and forensic countermeasures. He tried not to leave fingerprints. He didn't make contact with at least the first two crime scenes. It's sort of a ambush, just shoot them and then run away. You don't leave, no risk of leaving fingerprints. Seems like he didn't leave fingerprints on the shell casings, so he must have loaded his gun with gloves. He shows knowledge of, at least some level of knowledge of electricity, as far as the diagrams of his alleged bus bomb, which I agree was never going to be a real bomb. I think that he did that whole thing in order to waste police resources, waste police time. He originally said that he was going to shoot at the school bus and then change it to a bomb so that they could even have a wider area, because they have no idea where it's going to be. But that's putting that aside for a second. He's a mixture of organized and disorganized as far as the strict classifications go, because he's organized insofar as he has not left any fingerprints behind him. I agree with Mike that he has not left DNA behind him as far as we can tell. They don't have his, I don't think they have his DNA or anything like that.
They've been looking for it for 20 years and they can't find it. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, after a while you have to say, hey, it's not there, but they won't admit it's not there because it doesn't behoove them to say that.
I agree. And I'd also like to take a second to shout out Mike, you out, Mike. He's a great researcher, and I like the fact that he went out and actually talked to people, not just witnesses, but that he actually sat down and talked to the suspect.
Talked to a lot of people.
A lot of people.
A lot of people.
And I mean, going out and talking to professional profilers and stuff like that. And as far as Shel Cavalli goes, I don't dismiss him out of hand as a suspect. I know that some people think that just because he was wealthy that it means he couldn't be Zodiac. I don't think he can be ruled out by something like that. And if he really didn't lick the stamps or the envelope flaps, then as far as him volunteering his own DNA,
right, exactly.
That would be a move that you can make to be
I
like.
think the only viable piece of DNA evidence they have is that little hair, and I don't know that there's enough of it yet to run for for nuclear DNA. They might be able to run mitochondrial DNA on it, but that wouldn't really be useful.
Referring to the hair under the stamp on the Stein
Yeah,
letter.
the hair under the stamp. Yeah, it's so small. I used to estimate it at 5 to 6 millimeters. It may be even 3 to 4 millimeters. It's very small.
That was something where he could have missed that even if he checked, because I think it could have been something that fell loose from his face, maybe an eyebrow hair or something.
No, I'm just going to tell you what I was told years and years ago when this first started. I thought it was a mustache hair, because if Zodiac had a mustache, that's how you would get it on the stamp. But apparently it's not a mustache hair because it's too thin. So I had somebody look at it and they said some expert in hair said it was a body hair. Now, the thing that's interesting about that is that if people say, well, Zodiac dyed his hair reddish brown, he doesn't have reddish brown hair. The body hair is also reddish brown. So he would have to dye his arms or his body or something, and it doesn't make any sense. So to me, it confirms the fact that he had reddish brown hair.
I believe that as well. I also think that I'm a guy with hairy arms. Sometimes arm hairs fall loose. It could be something like that. But I believe it didn't get directly onto the stamp as he was applying it, but it may have been something that fell onto the envelope.
Yeah, it's just
slide on top.
Yeah.
But yeah. I think that he was careful and that he would have checked, and if he had seen a hair, that he would have taken it off. But at that point, the stamp was already affixed onto the envelope. He doesn't see the hair, and he thinks it's good. I think the same thing about the fingerprints on the Steincab, that he was wiping it down, and once he closed up the door from the perspective he was, that he thought that he had got rid of everything. The only prints that they had are on the inside of the door handle and on the door frame, and maybe there was some on the other side of the cab.
Well, you know what's interesting about the prints on the door handle is that they're from the extreme distal tip to the fingers, which is like, you know, if you were walking with your hands straight out into a wall, that's what you would hit it with. And to me, if he used collodion or whatever they used on his hands to mask his fingerprints, he probably would have covered the pads, but he might not have thought of covering the very tips. So those could actually be Zodiac's fingerprints, but you have to get them from him. You can't get them from a card, because a fingerprint card doesn't have the distal tips.
That's exactly right. I think that they are parts of the fingerprints where, and over again in the FBI files, you see where it says fingerprints were sent over for examination. No conclusion could be reached. We will need parts from different parts of the finger to be rolled up from this suspect in order to draw a conclusion. So I think that you're exactly right when it comes to that.
And of course, they never got near Cavalli to ask him questions like that, because the police were afraid of him. They ran the other direction. Whenever I brought up his name, the police ran.
I mean, he has a lot of resources if he wanted to sue anyone back when he was still alive. I did like the letter that you saw, and I saw the whole process. I saw you talk through the whole process of how you ended up finding that letter, and that you were working with Eddie, and that he was going through the Chronicle, and that he found this letter.
Right. I thought that Ed was the only person who had access to the files, to the microfilm, because I thought that there was only in San Francisco. I didn't realize that the Chronicle was in the New York City Library right near me.
Yeah, I heard about that too. And that letter reminded me of a letter to the Aggie, which is another Berkeley paper, and that one was sent in Berkeley, where there was a letter that was sent talking about the effete students of today, and that they were better dead, and that they were basically Viet Cong on American soil and stuff like that. It reminded me a bit of an anonymous letter to the Aggie.
I see.
Yeah.
Oh, well, it could have been him, I guess. And it doesn't matter if it was mailed in Berkeley. He could have been anywhere in the Bay Area. So, you know, I can't say that he wrote or didn't write it, but
I also will say, as far as to get back on topic, as far as the genius versus bungler angle, I think that he probably had a record as far as the Mikado. I don't think that he necessarily was a fan of the opera. It seems like he wrote that down from taking a listen or two and trying to remember the lyrics.
Right.
I will say I am absolutely sure, as somebody who was in theater myself, that the Zodiac never performed in the Mikado, because he says would never be missed instead of never would be missed, and that throws off the rhythm of the entire song. If you try to write down the lyrics that way, if you had sang it, you would know that it would be never would be missed and not would never be missed. He misspells several words and also just gets words wrong, but they're sound-alike words.
Confident in your face.
Yeah. I think that he listened to a record and maybe it was a little bit grainy, or maybe his hearing wasn't too good, and he got a couple of words wrong as far as that goes. I do think that it's interesting that he had reference to a photoelectric switch, and as far as his alleged bomb diagram. And so photoelectric switches are, sometimes they're used in irrigation, in farming, so that it can tell when the sun is up, stuff like that. But also he could have just been knowledgeable about electronics generally.
Well, Cavalli was involved with cars. I know that they use photoelectric switches on cars, but anything mechanical, certainly he would have known. I don't know if he would have known about photoelectric switches, but
yeah, I was just thinking through who would have photoelectric switches, cardboard tubes, gravel, and stove oil, and fertilizer, and it seems like, and shoe polish. Well, it seems like he's working a job where maybe you're expected to shine your shoes a little bit, where you have shoe polish lying around, but of course it's just stuff that can be bought on the open market. But as far as the genius versus bungler, I'd have to say he certainly thought he was a genius. I don't know if he was like in the 150s, 180s IQ or anything like that. I don't think that he was like a mastermind, but
Very-
I think he was thinking on a higher level about his crimes than your average serial killer.
Very good point, Justice. We actually, at the beginning of the program, we actually posted a poll in chat. So right now we are going to break in, and before we head to our next segment, we are going to take a quick look at those poll results. So Rod, if we can put those. So oh my goodness. Okay, this is when you know I'm old. Okay, I'm going to have to go in close to read this. We have 33.3% coming in as intellectual superiority, being the Zodiac primary psychological driver. We have another 33.3% as social power, being the social driver. 16.7 being public performance, and 16.7 being sadistic gratification. So looks like most of people in our chat are looking at social power and at intellectual superiority being the primary drivers. So we are going to take a look at those poll results. If you can continue to update your vote on that, and we'll take a look at that at the end of the program to see if your thoughts about that has changed. So right now,
Zodiac Theory Discord member Jibber Jabber takes aim at a popular narrative about Zodiac's mind. To the team of the Chronicle, your first topic is a killer's mindset? Perfect. Time to torch some fairy tales. Can we please retire the lonely, incel, jealous of couples narrative? The man killed a cab driver. He threatened school buses. Anybody was fair game. Yes, he preferred couples in secluded places, but here's a radical thought. Go hunting in secluded places, and that's exactly what you'll find. It's not deep as psychological symbolism, it's operational convenience. And like Berryessa, people love claiming his hand shook from fear. Seconds later, he's in a stabbing frenzy with Cecilia. That's not fear. That's either pure adrenaline or something darker manifesting. I'm convinced he had genuine psychological issues. Nobody acts that weird on purpose. The bizarre costume, cryptic symbolism, compulsive taunting. This isn't calculated theater. This is fundamentally different wiring. But please stop projecting political motivations. Anti-establishment, right-wing, show me the evidence. He only got ruffled when police called him a liar about Presidio Heights. That's ego, not ideology. Someone needs to challenge his comfortable assumptions. His mindset wasn't about revenge or politics. It was darker, stranger, and probably more alien than most researchers want to admit. I'll be watching to see if your panel has the guts to admit we might not understand this killer at all. A very provocative take. If you have a perspective that challenges long-held assumptions about this case, send it to the email address on your screen. Now we turn to our deep dive interview. Today, Blake H. joins us to present a case for a suspect he recently introduced to the community, Donald J. Nicol, a San Francisco special police officer who became infamous as a Spanking Cop. Blake has spent a considerable amount of time investigating Nicol's background, movements, and potential connection to the Zodiac crimes. Blake, what started you on your journey to research the Zodiac Killer case, and how long have you been working on the case?
I would say casual following of the case, 10 to 15 years, and doing my own research on the case probably just within this last year, using like newspapers, Ancestry, different tools online to do that.
What has been your focus of your research?
I think most of my time, I got 2 or 3 different suspects that I've ran into over the years, and it really bogs me down. When I find somebody that I think's good, I spend a lot of time on that person. So I'd say most of my research is on that. But if I'm not researching a particular POI suspect, I just like going through and trying to find like obscure articles that could be something Zodiac related, like a unconfirmed letter, post card, a crime that could have been Zodiac. I find something, then I'll cross-reference to forums in different places to see if others have talked about it, and then I usually go from there and to see if I can find something that might have slipped through the cracks over the years.
We're mainly going to discuss your current POI that you found that has been causing quite a stir on Zodiac Theory Discourse.
I would say he's probably at the top of my list. I think Donald Nicol fits a total profile of Zodiac.
And so what led you to Donald?
You know, probably know by now, because about a little bit within our Discord, that over the years I could find a slip up from Zodiac somewhere, because I was like, I hope he slipped up. I hope I just can find something somewhere. So I was on newspapers, and I set my search query prior to 1968, and I just typed in Lover's Lane, like around San Francisco and different other areas, like around Vallejo. Then I got a hit in San Francisco for this SFPD special patrolman within the city that had a Lover's Lane offense roughly a year and a half prior to the Zodiac crimes kicking off. I start looking at what he did to those kids, kidnapping them, getting in their car, having them spank each other, come back, you know, his geographical kind of setup, not just where he lived, but some of his past locations where he worked and different areas. It really started to paint a pretty good picture of this guy. Just through that, I've built more and more of a profile on him just over the last few months.
So what are the key points that make him of interest? We've already discussed a little bit about the main point that really brought you to him was the Lover's Lane situation. One of the important things that I thought that was a huge find for you that there was a lot of people that were really surprised at was the whole idea of the special police force that they had in San Francisco. So could you go into that a little bit, and also a little bit more about the situation with the spanking and how he ended up losing that job?
The special police force is something I didn't even know about. It seemed like he was more of a security guard type. You know, the SFPD, they had control over that special patrol unit, but he worked within that. I don't know if he patrolled a certain location or if he had like certain business that he watched over or what, but came up to the car around 1 a.m. with sound like a flashlight, kind of similar to, in my mind, what Zodiac did with Majo. Came up, had them roll down the windows, said, "Hey, you're under arrest." And they're like, "We didn't do anything." Like, "What are we doing?" And they're like, he just kept going on at them. And he's like, "All right, I'm not going to arrest you, but let me get in your car. I'm going to take you, drive me somewhere, and then we'll settle it, whatever." So he takes them to a sewing machine shop. He makes them spank each other. He says he's punishing them for their misbehavior. And then he has them drive him back to China Beach, which is the Lover's Lane in San Francisco. And he gets out of the car and says, "You better not report this." And he like leaves. So to me, it seems like that's a decent, something that's at least documented, which is nice, of something that could have been like an escalation point, like step before committing an even worse act. That's bad enough as it is, but after he gets arrested, he loses his job. He loses a position of power for him, like within the police force. You can't use that position of power. Loses probably financial income through that job. The sewing machine shop takes a hit because the address and everything's there for that shop, so he's known as that guy, and he works there. All that combined with his address, 257 Gary Street, that he worked earlier in life, that I found on his social security card, which is like within a block of where Paul Stein picked up Zodiac. He had that. He had ties to Vallejo around 1971, 72 and onward. So a lot of different things start piecing together. I think his handwriting's pretty good too, printed style, not necessarily like the letter style that we see, the fast kind of free-flowing style, but I think the printed like envelope style, I think his handwriting's pretty good for that. He's 13 when he did that, but I think it's relatively close. There's just a lot of stuff, I think, that starts adding up.
What do you feel like your POI's motivation are for the crimes?
I think even before the crimes, you can already see what his mindset is, who he's wanting to target. It's teenagers at Lover's Lanes. If he's escalating after his life falls apart, probably has nothing to lose, like his name's ruined. He's known as the Spanking Cop. So I think from there, it could be some form of revenge against the kids that told on him, cost him everything. And maybe in his mind, he didn't think he was doing wrong by letting them go. And then they tell on him, he loses everything. So part of it could be revenge. A part of it's maybe reputation rebuilding. His name, Donald Nicol, was tainted. It was very frowned upon, I'm sure. At the time, he lost a lot of stuff. So I think Zodiac could have been a creation within his mind to rebuild his own reputation. It's all about him end of the day. So he could use that as a platform to show people that, to fear me, I'm smarter than you.
all the above. I don't really know where his motivation started with the original kidnapping and spanking. It's very odd. There could be some sexual undertone, something that could be paralleled to the Zodiac attacks. I think Zodiac's preference was these young couples in these secluded areas, lovers' lanes. I think just, this guy, if he did escalate after the arrest, I could see him gets to the killing. It's the next escalation point. It's went beyond that, and killing is now more exciting.
He really early on had very much a trajectory towards criminology and the police, didn't he?
He was directed towards criminology in 1952. He was listening to an article by the time he was planning on coming out of the Air Force. He wanted to go back and study criminology. And for whatever reason, I don't know how he wound up in the sewing machine repair industry or dealer, but that's where he fell. Quite different from criminology. He had a very traumatic event earlier in life too, the plane crash. As a very domineering mother, from what I can tell. The articles listed his mother's shy son. He's 35 years old, and they're treating him kind of like a kid in the newspapers. And she's escorting him though, which is also kind of weird. Like she's right arm in arm with him in the courthouse. Right?
There's an interesting dichotomy as well, is that when you look at him from the very early on, he was part of the Civil Air Patrol as a teenager, which you really have to be kind of a go-getter in order to be part of that, as well as he said that he was a master sergeant when he was in the military, which to be a master sergeant at that young of an age, there has to be quite a bit of capabilities there. It's not like somebody who didn't have the capabilities to be a police officer if he really had set his mind to it.
He was in the Cap Cadets. He didn't necessarily drop out of high school, but he was kind of finishing his high school credits. That's when he's involved in a plane crash, like a 2-person plane crash, into a grove of willows, as it says in the article. And that's what basically almost to the exact day of the 25th anniversary of the Exorcist letter. It's like January 26th, 27th of 1949. So it's right around the 25th anniversary of that letter. And I think he was using that, maybe one, to sign off of the Zodiac, and then two, he's highlighting maybe that event in his life, that traumatic event. He arose from the ashes, probably gave him a feeling of invincibility later on, that if he became the Zodiac.
One of the biggest obstacles that researchers have who have a PLI is the difficulty in verifying that they were in key places where they needed to be in order to fit the crimes, mail the letters, make the phone calls that they needed to make. Where are you at with that part of the research?
I'm pretty confident where I'm at. That part's nice about him because his whole life he lived in San Francisco. He moved to Vallejo sometime 1971, 1972, opened a sewing machine shop, and I think he lived there the rest of his life, more or less. So I've got a pretty good timeline of where he was at through those critical years. He would have been in San Francisco living during the canonical crimes, where he lived at the time of the attacks. He's under 3 miles from Presidio Heights, China Beach, where he originally did the early crime. That's 2.3 miles from Presidio Heights. So he always lived in that area, and he even lived closer to the Presidio Heights attack spot earlier in his life. He always was in that area of San Francisco.
And where are you going with your research from here?
I'm pretty close to hitting a wall, I think. I'm still finding stuff, but I did send off for his military records the other day. I'm trying to get a draft card where I can confirm hair color and height. I have a pretty good idea on height now. I think he falls 5'10". The newer pictures that I confirmed, I know the other individual heights that are in the picture, and I can line him up with them. There's one guy in the picture that's 5'11", and he looks like an inch at most shorter than him, 2 inch at the very most. So I give him 5'8", 5'10" to be generous, and that guy's 5'11", so he's right. He's in the right ballpark. Hair color, it's either going to be dark brown or black. I've got that. Weight, the biggest problem I think with him right now is hair color and weight for me. It's my biggest hold off.
Have you been successful in finding a photograph of him during that time frame?
Not during the canonical crimes. I have late 40s and I have early 80s. Like 1980s, late 1940s, and then I have the one from his arrest from 1967, but he's covering his face. Zodiac was described as 200 pounds most of the time. We get anywhere from 180 to 250, I think, on all the descriptions. I think this guy is probably a little bit too skinny from what I have in 1967, but if he put on 20 pounds due to whatever reason, I think he would be right there.
What makes you so confident?
Yeah, I don't think anybody wants to maybe believe that Zodiac was the spanking cop. I don't either like it, but I think he portrays himself as Zodiac. He counts himself out there as like 200 IQ. I'm a super genius. You got to realize there's a man behind kind of Zodiac. So I try to look at it a lot that way. And just because Spanking Cops, I don't want to think that Zodiac was that, but that kind of fits the bill. Somebody that was a pitiful person that had to resort to that, targeted teenagers, using authority fits the bill. And then when you tie in some of his other geographical spots, all that too, I think he fits close to what I think Zodiac would be. I may not be right, but I think he's pretty close.
What is one piece of evidence that you've uncovered that you believe without a doubt would have led to a conviction if it were found back in the 1970s?
I think what I just laid out. I think if I was back then, I would call up SFPD like I've already done. Hope they listen to me. I say, I've got a guy here that a year and a half ago, he was doing these Lovers Lane offenses right in San Francisco. Oh, by the way, you also employed him and you fired him, and now he's pissed off. You might want to look at him. I think it would be the same narrative that I would say even today. It's enough, honestly. Like it's the right target. I think it's the right location.
It really would be a black eye to the San Francisco Police Department if they found out that the Zodiac Killer was, time employed by them.
I worry that his name did cross their desk and they looked at it and they go, oh, he was a cop. He was SFPD special patrolman and he spanked some kids. He's not a killer, and just pushed it aside. I worry that his name may have been sent to them. They didn't follow up enough on it. My biggest fear. I'm afraid that I'm going to figure something out and get there and then overlook it.
The Zodiac taunted police for years. Was that because he was just a killer, but an insider who knew exactly how to evade the law?
Always wondered if the Zodiac have a police scanner in his car the whole time. Donald wanted to study criminology. He was a part of the special patrol unit. Would have had some insight and probably would have been aware of some of the forensic information out there. And I think with Zodiac too, you see him learning along the ways with certain things, the Napa phone booth, and then you see him wiping down prints the next time. There's different stuff that you could maybe look at, but I think he was aware of some of their practices.
Were the Zodiac crimes a simply bizarre form of corporal punishment taken to their most legal extreme?
Possibly. People that are into corporal punishment have aggressive tendencies. They're antisocial. A lot of stuff that would, I think, maybe align with Zodiac. I think this guy spent a lot of time alone. I see Zodiac maybe as someone that outwardly would be a defender or a protector of like norms, or maybe he thought the kids were sinning, or he's a Puritan. Berkowitz, his anger was channeled through that. He viewed, whether he was jealous or he viewed the couples as committing some sort of sin, why he decided to target couples primarily. And then Paul Stein, he didn't want to commit a Lover's Lane crime that close to his house. He realized that they could possibly connect it to him a lot easier. He's probably aware too that the units are not cross collaboration between the two different police forces, which I think caused a lot of issues. Either that, or he wanted to prove he could kill a man, or he could kill anybody at any time.
Why don't we talk a little bit more about his timeline?
To try to piece together like a full working timeline for Donald. He gets arrested and then he goes on the probation, 1968. He has Selco Sewing Machine, he has Brothers Sewing Machine Company, and he has Nicol Enterprises. So Nicol Enterprises is under his own name, but they're all out of the same building. I think they do relatively the same stuff, like appliance sales / like sewing machine sales. So I started tracking that. And the two businesses he made, Nicol Enterprises and Brothers Sewing Machine Company, there's articles through like 1968. They stop around November, December, like October to December kind of time frame. So they stop around the first attack. They don't start back up until February, and then they run until May, like late May. They stop again. They don't start back up until middle of July, and then they run to July 31st when he sends his first correspondence. Then it stops for a week. And it stops. And then Nicol Enterprises runs all the way to October 11th, 1969. He never posts again under that, like phone number, anything ever again on the date of Paul Stein attack. That's the end of it. And then the Brothers Sewing Machine Company, that one, it like goes off again. It runs to like December 20th, and then it stops. They're all like starting and stopping right in line with all like the letters, all like attacks.
Have you found any kind of a connection that he had to Mount Diablo and the Phillips 66 map?
No, I tried to see how close crash site was, and I don't think it's anywhere near Mount Diablo. Where he crashed was like Chili Gulch area, like San Andreas Mountains. It was further out than Mount Diablo. So I'm not found anything for him there. The only time that I ever really found him outside of San Francisco was when he was at Castle Air Force Base in Merced, California. That was early 1950s. But yeah. Nothing to Mount Diablo.
The sunbathers at Lake Berryessa, the guy that was checking them out. I would say the younger picture of him kind of looked a little bit like that.
He still has the same hairstyle in 1967. The comb over from the left. I haven't seen his face from then, but I wouldn't say he's like a bad looking guy from what I could tell from his younger pictures. The voyeur at Berryessa, I feel like it's kind of weird because he doesn't quite match some of the descriptions, but a lot of the descriptions from Berryessa that day are right around the same height and weight. And what are the odds that there's two solo people out there that are doing weird, watching, and they're kind of doing the same actions? I think what he did is when he first pulls up next to the sunbathers, looked like he was doing stuff in his car, kind of sit there. Blue Rock Springs he leaves, so I think he could have left even at Berryessa, went down the road. I think a lot of the actions are very similar. People always describe Zodiac's voice as like a certain cadence, or there's something about it. And a lot of people said like a medium complexion. His mother was born in California, but his grandparents on his mother's side were both from Portugal, and they spoke Portuguese as a primary language. His grandparents on his dad's side are from Scotland. So he's half Scottish, half Portuguese. And then if they have different accents, maybe it created some particular cadence to his voice. With being half Portuguese, he may have like medium complexion as well as eyewitness accounts of Zodiac. So some of the stuff kind of does align. The thing that always troubles me is the hair color for Zodiac. It drives me crazy.
It's a difficult thing is that you really would need a photograph closer to that time frame. When you're trying to guess people's ages and weights, it is so inaccurate.
I'm confident now on his height. I wasn't on the rest picture. I get these later 1980 pictures, and one is the guy's 6'2", and he's considerably shorter than him. But then the other guy's 5'11", and he's roughly maybe 2 at the max shorter than that guy. He's almost like same height. So I just give the 5'8" to 5'10" range, but I'm pretty confident that's where he's at. I'm just, concerned about the hair color. I don't know what the true answer on the hair color is. I just don't know on what his weight was. But I think visually, if he gained like 20 more pounds, he would be like spot on.
You've been able to find anywhere where the type of vehicles that he used or he had access to?
That's another tough one. So the only two that I found is 1968 in September. He puts up for sale, I think, Ford mags, 14-inch Ford mags and buckets. So like bucket seat Ford mags. So that I don't know why you'd be selling the mags, like the wheels and the buckets, unless you're like modifying in some way your car. I'd love to hear what people thought about that, because I have no clue what he was doing. But he sold those, and that's the only time he ever sold any car parts under that number. And then there's another number that's on that article that I've never been able to find. It's not in any directories. It's never in any newspaper articles outside of this one. And then it comes up one more time in 1970 of selling a 1963 Volkswagen Beetle in 1970. So those are the two. I think he may have had access to a Beetle, and I think he may have had access to a Ford of some sort.
Right. Thank you, Blake. We appreciate your time and energy on the case.
Great. Thank you very much for that great piece, Blake. Getting all of our panel back. Got all of our great shiny faces back. Blake, you did in the chat tell us that you did have an update on some of the information that you were discussing, that you were looking into, that you had an update on.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that I've learned since, I guess, that initial interview. I did get back some of his documents. I got back, I had to go through the archives at St. Louis to get selective service records. Those were not listed on Ancestry or anywhere like that. He went he signed off around 1949. At the time in 1949, he was listed at 5'10" tall. So that was, around where I was guessing. I was guessing 5'8", 5'10". So we got 5'10". His hair color was black, which is what I figured. I thought it was dark brown or black. And his weight was 155 pounds. And this was in 1949. He's actually a little bit heavier than I thought he would be. I was guessing probably 140. So 155 pounds is a little bit heavier than I thought he would be at the time. And then there's been some new pictures that have kind of came out on him within newspapers and updates there. He's still covering his face, but I have like a side profile view of him now. I can't really gauge what he would have weighed. I think minimum probably 180 at the time. And that's 1967. That would be my guess. Another interesting thing I found, and I didn't really get into it probably as much in that interview, but there's another interesting connection with Donna Lass. I was listening to another panel show. I think is one that Jerome runs, and I think Jeruzer, you were on there, and Richard Grinnell, everybody was on there, and talking about Donna Lass, and they brought up her address at the time of Presidio Heights attack in San Francisco, which is at 4122 Balboa Street. And his sewing machine shop was at 4049 Balboa, which is under 200 feet away from her residence. And I'm not even convinced that Zodiac killed Donna Lass, but I found that was pretty interesting that he was basically within eye shot of her apartment, and it's right there. His stepson also gets married out in the Lake Tahoe area the same week she disappears. So that was another interesting thing there. But I think when you look at the profile of him, it kind of mixes in a lot of what I think about Zodiac. There is probably some sexual elements. He chose a job, which a lot of serial killers go kind of in that same trajectory. They take like a security guard type job, or maybe a cop, some position of power and authority that they can use that to basically to their benefit to offend. So he had the right job. He would have been using that as like a moonlighting job. I realized he's been doing that for 7 years. He started in 1960 through 1967. So for me, I could see Zodiac being a voyeur or a prowler, especially at night, kind of spying in on couples, maybe at lovers' lanes or different areas. So like that type of job with the authoritative position, that kind of aligns. If he had his own sewing machine shop, I'm not sure if he had help or not, but it's also a job that he could kind of tuck away. If he's a repairman, be a loner of sorts, he could kind of do his repairs. And I think if he did write the letters, ciphers, everything like that, it would have been within his workshop, because he did have a wife and a daughter at the time and a stepson. So I don't think he would have done that within his own house. He probably would have done it within the confines of a sewing machine shop. There's several things too that, he says to the kids, punishment for their misbehavior is why, that's basically why he said he was going to kidnap them and take them and spank them in his sewing machine shop. He didn't personally do it himself, but he watched them do that. I found another serial killer that was very similar. His name is George Kent Wallace. He's known as the Mad Paddler, which is interesting serial killer name. But he had a ruse that he would fake being a police officer. He would pick up kids. There was an escalation period, which I'm not sure if this was Donald's first offense. It may have been, and they caught him before he really took off. But the other guy, he kind of, he escalated. They arrested him. As soon as he got out of jail, he started killing. And he bound his victims. That guy did. He used a knife and a .22 handgun. And eventually how he was caught was he bound a victim, stabbed him a bunch of times. The victim played dead. When he untied him, the victim jumped up, kicked him over, stole his car, and then drove to the police station. So there's some parallels. There's some questions I do have about this type. If Nicol did escalate into a killer, I do have questions if it would have been necessarily in the same manner that Zodiac went about his killings. But you have other links to, like the connection with the SFPD. I think, when he's keeping his scorecard, he's claiming murders outside of San Francisco, but he's still kind of like, oh, I've killed 37 people and you're at 0. And he's targeting SFPD in particular. I think, he talks about cops generally, but he targets the SFPD. So with his link there and getting fired, I thought that was interesting. The news media kind of covered him very poorly, and rightfully so. They called him his mother's shy son, the Spanking Cop. They said he was playing peekaboo, which, you know, you can get into the Halloween card with some of the phrasings from that article. But I think just, you know, his Donald J. Nicol name, who he was, that was kind of tainted based on all the coverage he got. And I think he pivoted to becoming the Zodiac to try to reclaim some of that. And, you know, when he was a sewing machine repairman, he sold sewing machines that was under the White brand in 1963, and they did a nationwide advertisement running of those brands. It's the Zodiac model, which is another thing I thought was interesting. You know, possibly get the name there tagged with the Sodon emblem at Berryessa. There could be a link there, but, you know, all those things kind of encompassed is why I think he's a good fit. I don't know if he's the guy, because he does have some issues. But I think when I'm building out, you know, the psychology of a killer, I look at him as being a pretty good fit kind of across the board of what I think Zodiac might have been. And yeah, I'm open to any sort of discussion, however we want to take that from there. But yeah.
We're before we go on to some questions from the chat, I did want to touch on a couple of things to kind of tie all this together. First of all, Shadow, when we did our book club, Shadow of Mount Diablo, Mike Verdelli, we have hit the author here. Mike, we would love to have you. We're just naturally starting off this YouTube channel, but we would like to have you come back and discuss both more in depth in the Shadow of Mount Diablo, in further depth with just you. Also, if you come back and tell us a little bit more about your new book, because when we did this in our book club on the Zodiac server Discord, people really did appreciate the amount of research that went into this book. I mean, if this YouTube channel really is towards people who are doing research, if you are doing research, this is definitely a really good resource for doing your research, because Mike has actually been down, boots on the ground, and did a lot of research went into this book. And it is also a very well written book. It's a good read. I mean, sometimes when you look at books that are true crime and have a depth of research that this one has, sometimes it's difficult to read, but this is actually a really good read. So even if you're a casual true crime reader, this would be a good book to read. So
thank you. Thank you.
I appreciate your book and all the work that went into it. One of the things that I do want to touch on to kind of wrap all this together is that we weren't able to touch on a little bit earlier before we go into the comments is kind of the performative nature of the Zodiac Killer. We weren't really able to go into that, and also touch on some of the Norse and British elements, because he did pull in a lot of references to media, as well as in the ciphers that he used and the symbols, because I think that when you look at for a killer, you know, normally you would think that that if you are killing, that if the idea is to get away with it, he gave us a lot of stuff in the writings that he gave us. You know, I think I talked with the chat with Druser. It was, you know, we was saying, you know, when things go cold. But really, he gave us things that if these were just murders, and he didn't give us the writings that he did, if he didn't send those letters in, he gave us a lot of opportunities to be able to track him down through just his writings, because obviously he's even though a lot of it he's pulling from other areas, it does give us an idea of where he's pulling it from. And so a lot of that, when we look at it, you know, Shake has also talked about some of the things that he has found in his analysis of the ciphers, which he's done an excellent job of. There are a lot of Morse runes that were found in there. But when we talk about the performative element on this, Druser, if we can get your reaction to that, what is the purpose of some of the performative things that Zodiac used, such as, you know, we just physically Lake Berryessa, we can think of that being a very performative crime. as well as some of the theatrics that he's used and some of the writings that he has.
Well, I think first and foremost, it was all about fun. He enjoyed it. He started killing before he started writing or calling or doing anything like that. So while his motive may well have shifted after he got press calling his gunning down of these two teenagers as perhaps the most celebrated crime in California. They wrote that on March 30th of 1969, and they, in that same article, they said that they feared he was going to do it again, and furthermore, it would be easier for him this time. They absolutely have nothing, and you just can't track someone who commits a motiveless murder. Now we know that there's no such thing as motiveless murder, but I couldn't help but read that featured article as being rather encouraging to this guy. At any rate, in terms of theatricality, I think that one crime after another, he tried to up the ante. He obviously knew what was newsworthy and what was going to get him headlines. And after Lake Herman Road, he got less than a week's worth of headlines, and then he was pretty much dropped from the conversation. And after, I think when he did his Blue Rock Springs crime, he tried to make it sort of mirror the first one, and I think he had definitely planned to make a phone call afterwards. He probably found the phone booth before he committed the crime, and I don't know whether he knew that he was going to write letters to three competing newspapers at the same time with ciphers and all that. At some point in July, obviously, he solidified that plan, but I think it was 2 weeks after the Blue Rock Springs crime when the Vallejo police went on strike, and there was absolutely no more writing about his crime, that he thought, well, geez, I have to do something to get back in the headlines. I rather liked that. And even with the ciphers and the phone calls and the two murder attack claims, he still didn't get more than a week or so. And as soon as he revealed his name, he was immediately lost his headlines to crimes in San Jose, and of course in LA, the Tate LaBianca murders, these murders by knife that got so many headlines. I think that was another encouraging thing for him. He knew that if he had done if he committed crimes by knife, that he might get more headlines, and why not do the whole theatrical robe thing. I think there was a lot of different reasons why he used the hood. I think a lot of them were practical. I think a lot of them were theatrical and egotistical. I think he was probably prepared at that time that he may in fact get in a shootout. And if he had to die that day, I think he wanted it to be known that he was the great Zodiac Killer. And I think he just increased the theatricality for increased media coverage throughout.
Shake, you've done a lot of really great work recently, which I don't know how far out that has gone, but you've done a really good analysis of the ciphers and have found a connection with a lot of Norse runes when you did the analysis on your MATLAB, which I don't think people really know what you really do in real life, but you're actually we're talking about a genius. Our Shake actually is a genius. So, but he's done some really good work on that. And I know in the chat here we were talking a little bit about what you found. What we have found is quite a few references to either British or Norse references. So if you both, I think if we could hear a little bit about what you found as far as the Norse references.
Yes. Yes, thank you. And I would like to say that there was a time when I thought that the ciphers were all noise. This was my biggest mistake, and I'm happy to stand corrected. And this made me reassess and reevaluate the actual content of the man himself, of the offender. It's how said the other day in a dialogue on Discord that try to take him at face value. I mean, if he's putting runes out there, right on the combined key, you see immediately one of the worst runes of the worst runic system, which is the Armanen system. This is the system that was associated and actually opened the way for the worst regime of the 20th century. So when you have someone putting such a historically significant and emotionally weighted symbol right there on the key, it's like a huge poke in the eye. You can ignore it. Even though my study from the runic for the runic angle began from a totally different avenue. So when I stumbled across that, I began to slap myself figuratively, because it was right there and I hadn't paid the attention to the words of the man himself. So the infamous pencil that has been discussed is actually 10 different things to give you an association with the different pieces and columns of data set and reference indexes. It can be at the same time a symbol of the sun in astronomy. It is also the electric gun sight. Richard Grinnell recently gave us the information. I think he referenced Michael Butterfield about the 1908, December 20 article. This alone shows that the man would scrutinize old newspaper pieces. The pencil is also a phrase associated with the EK phrase from the Z13. I found the Proto-Indo-European root of the word ik and man. Both are associated with the runic perception of the memory and the subconscious. And then you have the pencil being also part with ek, of Troisus. Sorry, I'm not good with the old Anglo-Saxon names. Trolls and Crusade, the book of Chaucer, the classic medieval literature. Chaucer himself was associated with the area of northern Italy, the Piedmont area, as well as another member of a noble family that associates with the Willoughby family. All 7 canonical victims have ancestry from the 2 branches of the Willoughby family. Now I gave you the Proto-Indo-European of Hruech, which is the blackout for the weeds, the 408 solution, which is for 5 decades right there, but it had not been associated or investigated from a linguistic point of view. And I will get to the applicability of the linguistic aspect. And so this also ties into a precise direct quote from Richard II, the Shakespearean play, where in the same scene we have Lord Willoughby appearing, which is quite a coincidence for me to overlook, especially for a guy who is, he's spouting slaves in the afterlife. He's talking about the future, but essentially he's looking to the deep past of Egyptian lore and necromancy. And it makes sense because the Zodiac Circle has no future or past. It's a circular loop of time-space association. So these are some of the elements, and actually they tie in very much with Mike's research. In my opinion, there is at least one other very well-known POI who seems to have known and done business with Ragnar Cavalle, the brother of the POI that Mike's been looking. And the common liaison seems to have been Sonja Heine, the famous ice skater. She was the woman who put Ragnar Cavalle into Hollywood production. And it seems that this was the liaison with both the Hollywood career of the Cavalle family and the architectural breakthrough with the Vegas casino. And so if you look at this angle and you have all the other facets of the reference indexes, you have a clear tie to not necessarily a Norse ancestry, but an understanding of Norse culture. And I would like to close with that. It's very significant to remember that the runic system, as well as the zodiac system and the tarot card of the major arcana system, in the very epicenter of which we have the 13th card, which is the metamorphosis card, and it associates with the 13th rune, which is the Z rune, the tree of life. All these systems migrated into Europe through one specific geographical region. It's the Etruscan region. It is exactly the area of Piedmont in Italy.
Great, thanks, Sheikh. And we are going to look forward to having Sheikh also do a breakout session. We're going to call it the Shakedown, so he can go into more depth on his findings as well. We're going to move on now to the questions from the chat. So first question that we have is from Andrew Gray. Could Zodiac stumbling be confident carelessness rather than incompetence? So we are going to start off with Justice. Justice, what are your thoughts on that?
Confident carelessness, as in a callous disregard for whether he's being careful or not. Is that what you mean, Andrew?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, well, he wrote letters, like hand wrote letters, which he didn't have to do. He could have typed them. I think that at least shows that he was confident that nobody was going to recognize the writing, his handwriting, in the style that he was writing. I've definitely talked to Andrew before about how I have a theory that the Zodiac in his everyday life wrote in cursive, and that when he wrote the letters, he hand printed them. So that way, even if it was somebody who knew him personally and they were seeing images printed of these letters, they wouldn't recognize his writing style because he normally didn't print. And back then they even called them block letters because it was more common for people to write in cursive. As far as whether he was confidently careless, I think that he stuck around a lot longer than he should have at the Stein crime scene. I think eventually he landed on I think that it's suggestive that he had either a car nearby or he had some place to go nearby, which of course Mike has his thoughts on that. But I think that he eventually came to a risk-benefit analysis while he was wiping down the cab. The cops were closing in, and even however good of a job he had done wiping down the cab thus far, it was more important that he not be arrested directly outside the cab. So I think that he was he made it on his merry way and he got out of Dodge at that point. And as to whether or not he was stopped, whether or not he was the person who was stopped by Donald Folk, I'm not Falk, how do you say it? I don't know how you pronounce his name.
Falk.
But yeah, as far as whether or not he was the person who was stopped by Donald Falk, I'm not 100% sure. I do think that he was certainly in the area when that happened, and maybe he had witnessed the interaction. But I do think that Donald Falk's description matches up very well, not only with the Robbins kids' description, but also with, when it comes to the clothing, oddly specifically matches up with the description from Brian Hartnell at Lake Berryessa when it comes to the, if you look at the sketch that was done by the same artist from Presidio Heights, so I would hope that there's not cross-contamination between the discriminations in this case, or the descriptions in this case. I mean, discrimination was what I was going to talk about with, as far as the Donald Falk letting Zodiac get away. But as far as the descriptions, because the sketch of the Lake Berryessa costume, not the Graysmith sketch that comes up if you search for it on Google, but the actual police sketch that was done by that officer who, his first name was Juan, I don't remember.
Juan Morales.
Juan Morales, who had done the Presidio Heights sketch, and he also sat down with Brian Hartnell. And you can see on that sketch that he has elastic cuffs on the jacket and elastic waist on the jacket. He had described the jacket as dark blue or navy blue, and he had the Zodiac also in pleated slacks, although of a different color than what Donald Fouke was describing. But I think that normally when you have pleats in your slacks, it's for a reason. So you would have, if you had more than one pair of pants, even if they're different colors, you would still have them pleated because it gives you a little bit more breathing room. It might be suggestive that he has a little bit of a belly on him. I know that people described him as heavier set. I'm a heavier set person myself, and I like to have pleats on my slacks. Personally, I work at a suit store now called Men's Warehouse. I don't know if it's national, but in Cedar Rapids, so I'm a little bit more familiar with that now, how that works. But I think that Zodiac had staked out the crime scenes beforehand. I think that at Lake Herman Road, in particular, that he had been there earlier in the day. I don't know if the Bill Crow story specifically was him, because I know that there was some changes in the story with that as to whether there was one man in the car or whether there was two people in the car, or whether he was chased. He said he couldn't see his face, and then he said that he looked like he was being chased by the San Francisco Zodiac sketch. But so I don't know if that was necessarily the case, but I think he had staked out that road well enough that at Lake Herman Road, he knew normally how much time he had when a car passed and sort of had a feel for the flow of traffic. And that I think the reason why there's such a short, narrow period of time between the first car that passes by him, or say the last car that passes by, seeing two cars, and then the car that passes by that sees the bodies and ultimately reports the murder, is because he waited until James Owen drove by, waited till he sort of disappeared over the horizon, and then got out, committed the attack, and then left in short order. I don't think that it took him too terribly long. And then that by the time that the other witness had got there, that he was already gone.
Good. Thank you for that response. We're gonna move on to the next question. This one's from Donald Duck Quackers. Question: are there any indicators in the Zodiac's communications which show frustration or a loss of control? I think that we'll give that one to Mike.
I got stuck with this one. Okay.
Do you want me to pass this on to?
No. I mean, I haven't thought about it. The only letter that I can think of that comes to mind where we talked about a loss of control is the Melvin Belli letter, where he said I might lose complete control and start killing again. But show frustration or loss of control. I don't, off the top of my head, I can't think of any other letters that really fit that bill.
They wouldn't wear his buttons.
Oh, right. They wouldn't wear his buttons, right?
Right.
Yeah, that was true. That was frustration. Well, I guess he was losing control. He wanted to control the population, and he couldn't, so I guess he sort of lost control.
He was frustrated when they would call him a liar and mischaracterize what he was saying. He said that he went into the park, and they said he didn't go into the park, that kind of thing.
Right.
Controlling the narrative, like, I didn't squeal my tires, and he's wanting to control how he looks. Yeah. And
speaking of squealing his tires, I've wondered about that, because the eyewitness was actually an ear witness that night. He couldn't see anything. The caretaker's son, he could only hear. And when he heard the car peeling out, I'm wondering if that was Zodiac's car or if that was the car with the kids in it peeling out to go get help. So I'm sort of, I don't disbelieve Zodiac when he said that he pulled out quietly, because it's possible that the kids pulled up. I don't know. I have to talk to the eyewitness, or the ear witness, but it seems that he could have heard the car with the kids pulling out to go get help, and not Zodiac's car.
Didn't Mageau say that he saw him leaving at a high rate of speed as well? That was like the only other connection that I thought may have explained the squealing tires. But yeah, I mean, you could be right there as well. It could have been teenagers.
I certainly agree with the characterization that Zodiac was taking control of the narrative with his letters, because he wanted to control what they thought about him leaving at a slow rate of speed, him walking away, him after the Stein crime being talking to the cops and misdirecting them. It's all part of his creation of a character that is very cool and calm and collected and unaffected by the things that he's doing. Driving away slowly because he doesn't care that he just shot people, or just even talking to the cops and being unaffected. It's all part of his characterization of himself as a cool, calm and collected psychopath to make himself more scary. And I won't get into it too much. I just know that I think that the hood was also to serve the purpose of making him more scary, because I think that if he took the hood off, that he would look like a total dweeb, and that they wouldn't be too convinced that he was an ex-con trying to get to Mexico.
Okay, now we're going to move on to our next question. Kim, if you could put that up for us, please. 60th Fever asks, do you think religion had any role to play in this? Good question. Druzer, you're smiling, so I guess I'm going to go with Druzer.
I'm always smiling. I don't see much evidence that religion had anything other beyond inspiration in the Zodiac writings. I don't think he went to church on Sunday. I certainly don't believe that he believed in any of the slaves in the afterlife business. I think that was all part of the character. One thing you have to bear in mind when we're going through all these letters, which is really our only suggested evidence of anything, is that they could not have been more contrived. We're taking in whatever he wanted to project.
I have some thoughts on whether religion had any part in it. I do think that there's signs in the letters. I don't think that religion was a motivating factor. Like, I don't think that he thought that God was talking to him and commanding him to kill people or anything like that. But there's some signs in the letters of a religious upbringing, specifically it would have been the debut letter, the first letter in which he calls himself Zodiac. And you can see that he writes out, is it okay if I curse on the stream? Is that okay?
We didn't discuss this. I guess it is. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So he writes out the word bullshit, and then he censors the word damn and in that letter. And I think the way that I was brought up was that damn was the worst curse word because it was against the 10 Commandments. And you would say, if I ever said damn it, then my mother would say bless it. So I think he could just be making fun of religious people in a way, not like directly that was the point of anything, but that he's just kind of like throwing in. I know that he wants to try to get his letter published, but it didn't seem to bother him as far as, I don't know, maybe he was just writing in a frenzy because he was so upset that they had said that there was a new moon when it was really, or they had said that it was a full moon when there was really a new moon. And he was trying to brag about his flashlight device that he says he had at Lake Herman Road and brag about how brilliant he was to come up with this way of shooting people, which from what I understand, it was a common hunting story about it was also in Alfred Hitchcock's museum piece that they mentioned a hunting legend about a man who had affixed a flashlight to his .22 in such a way that it would strike in the center of the flashlight bulb shadow. And when I saw that, when I was watching Alfred Hitchcock Presents, I was like surprised and taken aback by that. And I took note of it and then found out that I was definitely not the first person who noticed that, which happens to many of us sometimes.
Great. Kim, next question. From Discovering Z, did he kill 5 or 3,700 plus? You know what, Mike? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, this gets into the. I think it's more like 5, but this gets into the Exorcist letter. Alan Keel told me that there are two letters that are forgeries. One of them is the 1978 letter, and another one is one of the 1974 letters. When Tom Voigt put out a a list of all the letters that Alan Keel had apparently analyzed. I think that's what it was. The only 1974 letter that he had analyzed before he left the lab was the Exorcist letter. So that's the one I'm going with. Plus, when the 1978 letter was first talked about in 1978 as being a forgery, they were talking about 2 forgeries, and the other one was the Exorcist letter. So I believe that the Exorcist letter may be the second forgery. That's why there's palm prints on it, and that's why there would be DNA on it, because the person that wrote it didn't, in contrast to Zodiac, licked his stamps and envelopes and didn't know to wear gloves when writing the letter. And that's why he left all those palm prints. And so the 37 is meaningless to me. Although I will add that if you take Zodiac's previous letter, 17 plus, and add 37 to it, you get 54. That was Cavalli's age at the time that letter was written. But I still think that that's just coincidental.
Greaser, what are your thoughts?
I think that DNA match claim is as ridiculous as 37 victims in 1974. That's a much larger discussion.
Well, that's Alan Keel. That's not me. Alan Keel told me that, and he told Lyndon Lafferty that in his book.
At any rate, I think Zodiac probably killed more people than 5, but probably less than 37. And there's really no way to know. I think he killed 5 people and wrote to the police and gave them evidence. And, you know, he may well have killed more people and just not told the cops about it.
Okay, Kim, next question. For Rodelli, have you personally interviewed Lindsay or Rebecca Robbins? And if so, are those available to view anywhere?
I didn't personally interview Lindsay or Rebecca because Lindsay was very police oriented. So I had my friend Jim Dean, who's next detective, interview Lindsay, and I listened to the tapes. Yes, there are tapes, but I'm not playing them for amateur investigators to satisfy their curiosity. If the police want to hear them, Jim has them. They can listen to them. But there are tapes. There are tapes, except for the first conversation, which took place right in front of Cavalli's house, because Jim wasn't ready for a phone call then. You know, Jim got a phone call from Lindsay when he was standing in front of Cavalli's house, and he ended up speaking to him right in front of Cavalli's house. But other than that, Jim recorded the conversations mainly so that I could hear them and so that we didn't miss any details.
Right. Okay, Kim, next question. And this looks like it's the last question we have. When did his game plan materialize? Before first assault, or did it evolve between the first and second? Blake, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, all I can really say is, you know, I would think between the first and second, maybe didn't have an exact idea of the direction he wanted to take it, just because he didn't write, you know, after the first crime. You know, he may, you know, within that time came up with the idea of the Zodiac and, you know, ran with it from there. But that was kind of along the lines of why I thought maybe there was a different motive. And, you know, I agree with Druser. I think maybe at some point it may have pivoted more towards the communications and the notoriety and the brand building. But I thought, you know, since he didn't write after the first one, there may have been, you know, another motive to the crimes, and then he kind of figured it out kind of between the two as the direction he wanted to take it.
And that's the last question that we have for today. So before we get ready to wrap up on the panel portion, I would like to get everyone's final thoughts on the killer's mindset. So if we can try to keep it tight, because we do have a couple of last pieces we need to play. If we could just have 20 or 30 seconds, what are your thoughts on the killer's mindset? Justice, we'll start with you.
Right. I think that the Zodiac was somebody who was neither poor nor was he overly wealthy. I don't have direct evidence to say how much money he had, other than the fact that he drove a relatively run-down car, from what I understand, at Lake Berryessa. It had bald tires on it, but he still had at least enough resources that he had Monarch cut paper. He was talking about buying up all of these resources for his alleged buzz bomb. Shoe polish is suggestive of a higher class job. I think that his main, okay, I'll try to keep it tighter. I think that his main motivation was that he felt unseen and he wanted to become a household name.
Great. Mike, what are your thoughts on his
I agree with Richard Walter with the power assertive profile, only because the only reason I agree with him, it's not because it matches my suspect, it's because it explains so much about the case. Zodiac was described as being aloof, powerful, distant. I forget. There's a whole laundry list of things that describe Zodiac, and all of those fall under the umbrella of a power assertive. So to me, that's why the power assertive profile is the correct profile.
Druser?
He was bored. He was evil. He decided to kill someone. He liked it. He liked that they wrote about him. So he started engaging with them, confident that he was not on anyone's radar. I don't think he lived in any of the towns he killed in. Eventually, they stopped publishing his writings, and then he got bored and quit.
Blake?
Simple enough, I think, no matter what his background was, rich or poor. I mean, it's pretty obvious that, he's a pretty pitiful individual that, resorted to murder to get his point across. I don't see him being anything other than, somebody that was pitiful in their day-to-day life. But then at the end of the day, I think no matter who we really target for being Zodiac, we do have to realize we're all on the same team at the end of the day, and it takes a village, and it takes all of us if we're ever going to find the guy that did it.
Very good. Sheikh, your final thoughts?
Yes, thank you, Cheryl. I agree, he was a power assertive sociopath. That attribute within the context of a system builder, essentially. He utilized dozens of different coding systems into a unified, unique blend of narrative. This narrative had to be, like everyone and everything else, under his absolute dominant control. And within that context, the sociopathic homicidal maniac is the portrait of the Friar Puck. He is the laughing clown. He is the Joker, like his other movie icon, Dr. Zodiac. Maybe it's a joke of history that the same actor who played Dr. Zodiac in the 1939 movie was the same actor who played Joker in 1966. But at the end of the day, remember that he is also the commemorative historian. He sent the Belli letter 1 year precisely after Lake Herman Road. For him, the murders are not only acts of commemoration, but lectures and diatribes. Through his letters, the detached individual is lecturing the public for his place in eternity that he thinks he deserves. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much, Sheikh. We need to go ahead and take a look at our final poll information. We'll see if that has changed any. It looks like it has remained the same, 33.3% for both social power and public performance. It changed a little bit, 22.2 for intellectual superiority and 11.1 for sadistic gratification. Well, very interesting changes. So now we are going to go on to our information for a new challenge. So ready to queue up the Cipher challenge.
The Zodiac built his myth with cryptid codes. Now it's your turn to crack one. It's time for this month's Cipher challenge. Watch closely. The video contains clues to help guide your work. We're taking you to a familiar but unwelcoming place.
Вот он, схватите его сейчас.
There's a challenge. First correct entry wins some Zodiac Theory swag and a shout out on our next episode. A PDF of the Cipher is linked in the show description. Good luck.
Great. Thank you all. Thank you all for being here. That wraps up our show for today. And before we go, I know they don't want the feedback, but I want to give a big thank you to all the people behind the scenes. Our producers, Rob, who has done an amazing job behind the scenes, as well as co-producer Kim, Solid Snake for developing the Cipher and all the work that he's done with booking. And make sure that you check out Jerome, Mr. Belgique's channel. It looks like he's going live at 8 o'clock in about 3 hours from now. He's going to be talking about the Z13 and also catch Dion's live that's coming up. He's going to be doing a live Q&As on the FBI files. So check out all the links in the description. Like, subscribe, and hit the little bell. Everybody, the case might be cold, but the work is not. So until next week and the next time that we see you next month, stay safe. And thank you all to all of our panel members. Thank you.
After the talk, I check my phone again. Coffee ring stains on the conference table. Someone says genius, and I nod like I earned it. Practice my handshake, straighten the cable. But high in the arch, there's a hairline fracture. I trace it at night when I can't fall asleep. A little vibration behind the sternum. Keep your face, still don't let them see. There's a keystone loose in the mastermind's head. 1 degree off from the words that I said. I feel the weight of 1,000 small lies. One crack spreads and the whole thing dies. You text, how are you? I type back, crushing it. Delete, retype, good thanks. Every applause feels like borrowed time. Every quiet room a waiting trap. When the questions hit, my vision tilts sideways. The exit sign glows a little too bright. I clear my throat and by 3 the myth? Or do I come home? They call me the mastermind, now meet the coward. I'm done with the weight that's crushing my chest. Let the keystone slip, let the whole thing shatter. What's left in the wreckage is mine to protect. I take one breath and tell you the truth. If it all falls down, stay in the room. Keys in the dish. Your hand finds my shoulder. The dust settles. No alarms.